All right, everybody want to grab their seats? We're at 8:30 p.m. here. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speed Group of Doylestown. Real quick, bathrooms are now being used behind that doorway there to the left. The church is back to their normal procedures, and that's there for their congregation, so be mindful of that. Other than that, it's pretty simple. Don't forget the meeting before the meeting, after the meeting. We got Father Nick on the chair of the meeting tonight, so let's welcome Father Nick up here.
Good evening, my children. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speed Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Nick, and I am an alcoholic. Amen. This is a one-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street, at 8:30 p.m. in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Food and fellowship starts at 8 p.m. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 right here. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teachings of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. And this is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves with their first name? Yes, sir.
Casey,
hey, Casey, welcome.
Dave,
hey, Dave, welcome. Hey, Charlie, welcome. Welcome to everybody. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD Donations. If you would like a CD of any speaker past or present, please see me or any home group member before or after the meeting, and they are available free of charge. And now with that, I have Sir Jack to come up and read the AA preamble.
My name is Jack. I'm an alcoholic. Hey, everybody. AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help others, alcoholics, to achieve sobriety. And I'd ask Andrew to come up and read the 12 steps.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew, and I'm an alcoholic. And these are the 12 steps of recovery. Number 1, we admitted that we are powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we have harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and a power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Thank you.
We have a 7 tradition which states every AA group ought to be fully self-supported, including outside contributions. At this time, we'd like to pass the basket. And we have no dues or fees, but we do have expenses, and this group provides many services. Your donations cover rent, big books, CDs, events, and workshops. And there is absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. And just a side note, if anybody wants to do a fifth step, we can do a fifth step after the meeting in the chapel, if you'd like to do a fifth step with me. And now to introduce our speaker, came here to us from California, Adam T.
My name is Adam. I'm an alcoholic. Want to thank the group. Thank you for inviting me to come talk tonight. It's an honor and a privilege to be asked to participate in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a responsibility to give back what was so freely given to me. Welcome to the new guys. Anybody that's new, if you're trying AA again. If you don't want to be here tonight, if you don't think Alcoholics Anonymous will work for you, I didn't get here because I had a bad weekend. I had a couple of bad decades. And for me, like a lot of us, eventually this becomes a matter of life and death. Every meeting has their perpetual newcomer, especially, in a smaller community. We see that lost soul recycling through the rooms. And I live in Southern California. We get about 3,000 meetings a week in our area. And I stood up for 17 years. It was ridiculous. I had so many chips and key tags. We know the drill, right? I could have played poker with them. I remember one secretary saying, "Give them back." And I did that walk of shame over and over and over again. And looking back at that experience now, I thank God for the unconditional love of the old-timers. A lot of the old-timers that aren't with us anymore. A lot of those guys that died were 20, 30, 40 years sober. And they would say stuff to me like, "You know what? Don't even bother taking chips. Just sit in the back. Shut up." But in a loving way, right? But they made it really clear to me, and if you're new, I hope you hear this. They made it really clear to me that if and when I was ready, because they could see it by my demeanor, my lack of interest, my fidgety nature, my attitude, those old-timers had the wisdom to see that it wasn't right now. But they made it really clear to me that if and when I was ready, that the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous would always be open to a drunk like me. And I think looking back at that experience now, next to my parents, Alcoholics Anonymous is the closest thing to unconditional love that someone like me will ever experience. No matter how many people I burned, how many hearts I broke, how many jobs I lost, how many cars I wrecked, how many despicable, shameful things I did. And if you are, in fact, an alcoholic, it's the most shameful thing in the world to be the family drunk. Especially if you come from a large family like I do with, cousins and uncles and aunts and, everyone hears about it. Everyone hears, one more rubber room, one more jail cell. The high price we pay for this really low quality of life, right? Happy birthday, Dad. I'm in jail. Does anybody relate to being paid not to come home on the holidays? That was my life. And I think about it now. I was a straight A student. I was the top of all my classes. And I look back at that first drink. And I remember it like it was yesterday. That first drink for me, a lot of people don't remember it. But for me, it was probably the most significant event of my entire life. I loved my mom and dad. I loved school. And I took that first drink. My mom and dad were married 47 years. She was working that day. And my dad invited us. We went to this party. And it was all my mom's old 35-year-old friends at that time. And there were screwdrivers everywhere. And I drank as many of those as I could. And I danced with all her friends. And that set something in motion for me, like Bill Wilson said. It forged a weapon that later cut me to ribbons. And I chased that feeling for the next 20-something years. And I look back at it now, and I look at the love and the hope that moms and dads have for their kids. Because I was so good in school. I got all these awards. And you see parents outside these elementary schools waiting for their children. You see the love and the hope that they have. And to watch my mom and dad literally watch me burn my life to the ground. I burned my life to the ground like a lot of us, right? That's kind of like the cover charge for AA. This is the most expensive club in the world. I mean, we don't want to say stuff like that, especially with a priest here, but they used to say AA's $1 million program shoved up your butt a nickel at a time. I mean, you hear a lot of stuff here. This is the only place in the world where you can get medical advice from a junkie, right? You know, I mean, you get legal advice from a convict, marital advice from a stripper. But if you're new, we can give you suggestions on recovery. We can give you suggestions on recovery. And my mom and dad, to watch me literally burn my life to the ground the way that I did. My mom had sold the family property, moved, and did not leave a forwarding address. That's where I left that woman after everything she did for me. I absolutely destroyed their world. And despite all of that, the doors of AA have always been open to people like me. If I lived to be 100 years old, I could never pay AA back for the love and kindness that a lot of you people have shown me. Not everybody. I hate to say it, if you like everybody in AA, like I said earlier today, you know what it means? It means you're probably not going to enough meetings. You know, my news sponsor says, you really don't have to like anyone in particular, but you will learn to love people in general here. You cannot afford to harbor resentments here. You know, I go, one of my home groups is a place called the Marina Center, and it's like the ER of AA. People come up with, shopping baskets. That's where they start. And it's so interesting because in the first few years of my recovery, I wanted to change everything about Alcoholics Anonymous. The way we ran the meetings, the formats, the coffee. And we see people like that. We have people coming to our meeting every week, and they want to change our format and the way we run our meetings. And a couple weeks later, we never see them again. And the longer I've been sober, the more I've wanted to keep Alcoholics Anonymous exactly the way it is. It's like the steps stop me from committing suicide. The traditions stop us from committing homicide. You don't believe it? Get involved in a business meeting. One of us doesn't work the steps, one of us dies. We don't work the 12 traditions, we all die. And AA has done for me what I could never, ever do for myself. Eventually, I started coming to meetings drunk. The interesting thing about AA 2021, if you actually see a drunk person in an AA meeting these days, people say stuff like, oh my gosh, what's he doing here? You don't see a lot of wet alcoholics in AA, and I don't want to bash the therapeutic community, right? Which is now, a $35 billion a year industry, right next to annuities in the Wall Street Journal. Kind of swoops people like me up in my most desperate moments, throws me into yoga class. Right? I mean, that's going to fix me, right? Craft hour. I'm making belt buckles and bongs. Nature walks, that's somehow it. I'm going to 7-Eleven, getting a big gulp cup, filling it up with liquor, putting a little Coca-Cola on top so no one will notice. And I walk into the late night Hollywood candlelight meeting. Do some of my best sharing. And then I start going through institutions. By the time I finally got sober in AA, and I'm not bragging, I went through treatment 28 times. Not 28 days like the movie, this isn't Hollywood. 28 consecutive times, and I'm wearing that like a badge of honor. I'm thinking that's what makes me an alcoholic. It's become my identity. And I remember telling my late sponsor I went through treatment 28 times, and he starts laughing hysterically. And I'm like, I don't think that's funny. And he says, Adam, that doesn't make you an alcoholic. And I thought, you're kidding. He says, oh no, that just means you paid $500,000 for a big boat. See, treatment was a great place to fatten me up for another run. Treatment has its rightful place in recovery. Treatment may have saved my life. Treatment may have slowed me down enough to hear the message. Even Bill Wilson had gone through treatment. Silkworth says we favor hospitalization for the alcoholic that's befogged or jittery. Some people don't go through treatment. It is not a prerequisite. In fact, if you wonder what all the treatment centers and religions do have in common, they all send their drunks to us. But the bottom line is treatment never solved the problem. And then as an alcoholic, like a lot of us, I always thought the problem was liquor. I thought it was alcohol. And I remember someone in AA saying to me, Adam, if alcohol is your problem, that drink, that shot glass, that 12-pack, that little glass of Chardonnay, if that's your problem, you're probably not an alcoholic. And then he paused, and in the very next breath he said to me, and if you are in fact an alcoholic, the type that's described in masterly detail, as Silkworth says, in the doctor's opinion, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, your problem is not alcohol. And it took me another decade. It took me 10 more years to understand that statement. It was almost like some kind of cruel riddle. I drank over that for years. But what happened to me, and we use the word serendipity a lot, what happened to me is I got around a group of big book literalists, people in the fellowship that took the statements in the big book, turned those statements into questions, and directed those questions at me. Questions like, was I incapable of being honest with myself? Questions like, did I drink because I like the effect produced by alcohol? Was I restless, irritable, and discontent by nature? Was that my natural state before I took a drink? Was my greatest obsession that somehow, someday, I would control and enjoy my drinking at the same time? It's a good question. Did I pursue that illusion, meaning just out of reach to the gates of insanity and death? And as I went through those considerations, for the first time I saw the truth. And the most obvious truth, the external unmanageability, was clear as a bell. I was never really able to live successfully with alcohol. Even as a teenager, I was already peeing in my pants. I was already drooling on my desk. I was already passed out under the bleachers. I always overshot the mark. My nickname in 8th grade was Space Cadet. I couldn't find homeroom. People are picking high schools. I was already picking rehabs. But if you're new tonight, alcoholism comes in people. It doesn't come in bottles or 6-packs or kegs or 12-packs or shot glasses or little fancy glasses of wine. Alcoholism comes in people. And the greater aspect of this spiritual illness, as Bill Wilson describes it, centering in my mind, if going through the considerations in the big book shows me anything at all, it shows me that an alcoholic of my type, an alcoholic of this type, cannot live without alcohol. Not successfully, not happily. And part of what it seems to really mean for me to be an alcoholic, if I'm honest about my relationship with liquor, is that I seem to have a mind that will consistently take me back to alcohol. Every time I get released from a treatment center, an emergency room, a hospital, men's central jail, I was talking about this today, I hear that release number, 4753, roll it up. And as soon as I hear that number, it doesn't matter how long I've been sitting in that cell, reading books, peacefully having lunch, I hear that number, and suddenly there is this visceral compulsion to drink that is so powerful in me that I can't even stop at that release module from my property. It's like being in a room like this, we were talking about it today, and suddenly getting a text, I get $10,000, bro, you want a drink? And all my life I was one decision away from a drink. And today, if you're new, between me and that decision, there is a whole world called recovery. It's about people like you. It's about the rooms of AA. It's about this way of life. It's about a design for living. It's about a roadmap to spiritual success. For many of us, it's about this mystery we call God, which we might be able to understand a relationship to, but not a definition of, as we were talking about. For me, it seems to be about a deep and effective spiritual experience, which in many ways seems to be the culmination of these seemingly unrelated actions that I've been asked to take in Alcoholics Anonymous that create this thing which is greater than all of its parts. A deep and effective spiritual experience that stands between me and that decision. So powerful, yet really so hard for a newcomer to understand, as we were talking about, this deep, effective spiritual experience. Something that now, like it says in those 10-step promises, where it says, I cease fighting anyone or anything. And it talks about the problem has been removed. It does not exist for me. I recoil as if from a hot flame. Those are very, very powerful. And mind you, they come after the first 10 steps. They don't happen in the second step. To really understand that insanity of being an alcoholic. And I always thought insanity was doing the same thing and expecting different results. We hear that in AA all the time. That's not the insanity I deal with. The insanity I have as an alcoholic is doing the same thing, knowing exactly what's going to happen and doing it anyway. At least the other type of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting different results, at least there's some hope there. But really, I know exactly what will happen. We were talking about that on the way up here. I know exactly what's going to happen. I'll take a drink, the drink will take a drink, and the drink will take me. And if I'm lucky, after being incarcerated or placed in one institution after another, like in the chapter to wives, that fourth type of alcoholic in that chapter, I may get back here. So what it really means for someone like me to be an alcoholic is I have this mind that will continue to take me back to drinking. It's almost like my default mode, like on a computer. And I've had the privilege of sponsoring a lot of really smart guys that write code, that build apps. A lot of them are programmers, engineers. The joke amongst engineers is, if you can't make it as an engineer, you become a doctor. No, it's true, but they're alcoholic. And by the way, mathematical equation, potential plus alcoholism equals 0. I was very gifted in school. I couldn't make it past the liquor store. With all the MFTs, all the therapy, all the psychiatry, I still, like Dr. Silkworth says in the doctor's opinion, with all our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach, he says we are not well equipped to deal with this. And right there in my book it's written, we can't fix you. Figure that one out? They couldn't fix me. They couldn't solve the problem for me. So what it really means to be an alcoholic, it's almost like my default mode, like on a computer. And a lot of these guys I sponsor, we talk about the language that Bill Wilson uses in 1939 and how really advanced it was for that time period. Because today we use the word program all the time. It's common language. And one of the definitions of a program, if you look it up in the dictionary, is so simple and so parallel to what we do today. One of the definitions of a program, if you look it up in the dictionary, is right here. It is a sequential set of instructions designed to bring about a result. Now listen to the language. What do you do when you get a corrupt file on a computer? Well, it's obvious. You install a recovery disk. And the function of that disk is to restore that program to an earlier point in the process. It never occurred to me that steps 10 and 11 for me would eventually become almost like a viral scan. That if I do exactly what this book asks me to do, take these very specific instructions, when I get to that 10th step, I get what we call mindfulness. I get transparency. I develop accountability. Suddenly I'm able to navigate around the drama. I'm able to watch for the lies I tell myself, which really is where I paint the red flags green in every area of my life. That bookending of the day where when I retire at night, I do this review. Upon awakening, I ask God to direct my thinking, to be divorced from self-seeking motives. And it's really interesting because the word ask is used there 6 times. Every one of those is a prayer. Every single one of those. And what happened is when I started to incorporate those 3 ideas in 10, 11, and 12 into my life, suddenly something happened to me that I'd never had before. And what it was I started to develop a quiet mind and a loving heart. Very, very powerful. It never occurred to me when Wilson says principles before personalities. It was really the founder's future hope that these spiritual instructions, these guidelines would have more impact than the sometimes hysterical, untethered opinions in the fellowship. And I love the fellowship. I love hanging out, going to Denny's, going to barbecues, all the events that we do. But for me, like a lot of us, the fellowship, and it even says it in the 2nd chapter, it says that the fellowship is but one element in the powerful cement that binds us. And there's a warning there. It says it would have never held us together as we are now joined. See, that fellowship gives me enthusiasm, right? It gives me inspiration. It gives me encouragement. It gives me hope. Brotherly love. Some people actually find relationships and employment here. But if you unleash a character like me into a large group of people like this without guiding principles, it's almost like My character defects thrive. I get sicker in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous without guiding principles. And what that really means to me is somehow I become more separate, more different, and more alone. And if you haven't heard that terminology, it really means separated from God, right? Different than every single person here. I think we call that terminal uniqueness. And alone. You know that loneliness, that ache in the heart of every one of us that really has nothing to do with the proximity or closeness of other people? That loneliness when I hit that pillow at night that I can't talk about, that might be happening right now. And what that is, if you're new, is my inability to connect with others. And you put a couple of drinks in me, I'm calling people from 5th grade saying, I love you. I go right into amends, right? Put a couple of drinks in me, and all of a sudden I'm at one with the universe. I'm standing on the roof of my building, howling at the moon. A couple more drinks, suddenly I'm okay with me. Get me good and drunk, and I lose interest in selfish things, and suddenly there's this turn, and I gain interest in my fellows. See, alcohol creates the illusion that my life was manageable. And my experience continues to show me that unless I can develop that sense of comfort and ease that I always sought from alcohol through this process, a drunk like me will never stay here. And it's been said by many people, the view from the center of AA is very different than it is from the outside. You know how many people come through that door? And how many people actually stay here? If everyone walked through that door, stayed here, we'd probably be in a football field. And being parallel to being separate, different, and alone, for me, my experience is there's 3 fundamental pillars in recovery. The first one is to be protected by some kind of God. And I never saw that. You go to the ocean with a little cup, you get a cup full of water. I was told if you go to the ocean with your whole life, that relationship looks like it's very, very different. Take my will, take my life, guide me in recovery, take my relationship, take my resentment, take my fear. And you hear it in every meeting. We ask for His care and protection with complete abandon. You abandon a ship, you can't get back on. You know, there's an AA prayer. It says, God, thank you for everything you've given me. Thank you for everything you've taken away. But most of all, thank you for what you've left me. That first piece. The second, to be accepted by self. And what that is in steps 4 through 7 is I no longer need internal or external validation. I develop over a period of time what we call an internal locus of control. And the third piece, to be connected to a community. And that's where the fellowship becomes a powerful element in the cement that binds us. Protected by God, accepted by self, connected to a community. And I go from being the weakest link in my family, and I'm talking about generations of suicide, mental illness, and alcoholism. My mom's brother committed suicide drunk. My father's brother committed suicide drunk. And to be 23 years away from that and now be the strongest link in that family, it is said that alcoholism is the only disease, when treated, that will actually leave the sufferer in a better position than if they never had the disease. I'd have never believed that. I would have never believed it until I got around people in recovery that really were chasing their dreams, that had lives that make sense. My sponsor said to me, he said, Adam, it doesn't matter who's wrong. It doesn't matter who's right. It just matters who's left. And I start to look at people with long-term recovery. And it became important to me. It says it right in the 12 and 12 in the 9th tradition. It says that if any member fails to practice the 12 steps to the best of their ability, they sign their own death warrant. And I never saw that. And when I look back at 17 years of failure, even in the fellowship, and I'm talking about, I live in a place, like I said, where we have like almost 3,000 meetings a week. And what I see is my defiance towards spiritual principles. And what that looks like, if you're new, is that I will argue with anybody about anything at any time. You tell me it's black, I'll tell you it's white. You tell me it's big, I'll tell you it's small. You tell me to go left, I'll go right with an attitude. And then I'll blame you for eternity, right? That's why we say denial's an acronym. It stands for don't even notice I am lying. Think about it. You could tell an alcoholic, you can't tell them much. Oh, you don't believe it? Try sponsoring somebody. And what that means is you can lead me into the gates of hell, but you can't push me into heaven. And when we talk about attraction rather than promotion, in that 11th tradition, what I discovered for me is eventually I would come back to AA if you're new. Eventually I would come back here on my own terms. Not because sober living wanted me to, not because my parole officer wanted me to, not because DCSF thought it was a good idea. Where I live, they all get sober for the trust fund. But see, hope doesn't matter to me. My experience in working with new people is hope doesn't matter to someone like me until I'm hopeless. You think hope's going to matter to me when I got $500,000 in the bank, brand new truck, little trophy wife in the living room, boat down in the marina? Please, you wouldn't catch me dead in an AA meeting. And if you're new, my experience is that God didn't matter to me until my back was against the wall. You know, I was talking about this today too. It's like I spoke at another meeting today. I feel kind of weird because my friends are here and it's like it's the same talk. But I got shot in a little argument, and I was laying on the gurney, and I was bleeding, and I had the paramedics over me with the paddles. And I've heard a lot of people talk about this. It's like all I know is God. You know, if you've ever been faced with mortality in a car wreck, or seen somebody die, it's like there's only two things people like us try for: mommy and God, right? I mean, you get your head in that toilet, puking your guts out every morning. Who prays more than drunks like us? And what's so interesting is I get a couple of days away from an experience like that, and you've got to write this elaborate chapter called We Agnostics to try to prove and establish to me there just might be a power other than me. The arrogance that spans between me and any kind of spiritual experience is absolutely astonishing. In Bill's story, he talked about this white light experience, and then he talks about that they were quickly blotted out by worldly clamors, most of which were within himself. And I have a coin. I've never seen this coin anywhere else in AA, but it's a coin that I was given in recovery, and it says, "The greatest battle in a man's life is not against his brother or sister, it is against himself." And I still have that coin. And if you're new, I ask you, what do you think it is? What is it that blocks us from an amazing life, from chasing our dreams, from having long-term relationships? What is it that blocks me from truly having joy? It's very much like Michelangelo said. He was asked, "How did you make the statue of David?" And the old line was, "I never made the statue of David. I just chipped away everything that wasn't David, and there he was." And what I discovered, it's very easy. I'm not going to turn this into a history talk, but I live very close to the Hollywood Bowl. And if you look this up on your phone, in 1939, when the Big Book was published, the Oxford group met at the Hollywood Bowl. 30,000 people went to that meeting. And they believe that, if everybody's heard the word enthusiasm, it means theos. It means filled with the Spirit of God. And they believe there were four things that blocked a human being from God. The first is a dubious luxury I will not forego. 2, a secret I will not confess. 3, a restitution I will not make. And 4, someone I will not forgive. And what they believe is if a human being was clear to those 4 things, the light of God for those that believe, or the light of the Spirit would shine through them like a beacon, and they would be forever changed. And they called that at that time a conversion experience. We call that today a spiritual awakening. But what I discovered, it's those same 4 things. The dubious luxuries I will not forego is the selfishness. The secrets I will not confess, the dishonesty. The restitutions I will not make, the fear. And someone or something I cannot forgive, resentment. And it became so clear to me when I started to do that inventory for the first time in my life. I started to become unblocked. Suddenly, there was something that unblocked me. And if you're new, what I never understood about alcoholism is that for someone like me, the pain's already built into me. I don't need to be in a shitty relationship or a dead-end job. All I have to do is stop doing 10 and 11, and what happens is slowly I self-destruct from the inside out. And until I really understood what the problem was for me, the solution wasn't going to work. And it's interesting because in the doctor's opinion, it says many of us are entirely normal in every respect except the effect produced by alcohol. Normal, able, friendly people. That's not who I am. That's never been a description of me. There's another type there, right? Restless, irritable, discontent. And I think we have a new word for restless now, right? What's it called? ADD. But I don't have ADD. I like my friend Patrick here, but if Patrick had a couple $1 million cash in the back of his truck, I'd probably follow him home tonight. See, what I got is something called selective interest disorder. I'm really only interested in things about me, right? That's enough about me. What do you think of me? I don't think much of myself, but I'm all I think about. Sound familiar? So because when I'm obsessed with a relationship or a job or a motorcycle, there is nothing, if anything gets in the way of what I want, I will burn it to the ground to get what I want. I don't have ADD. I have an irritability, which actually is a quickness to anger. It's a slowness to forgive. Sound familiar? I keep score in every relationship that I'm in. Sound familiar? I remember everything I should forget. I forget everything I should remember. And then I have this discontentment, which is the king of all of them. Because what it really means is the shine wears off everything right away. It doesn't matter what I get. I could have a brand new car. I've been saving all year for that car. I don't even get it off the dealer's lot. It's the wrong color. Right? 72 payments. I get a new house. I'm not even out of escrow. Hate the neighbors. Hate them. And their dog. Right? We've all done that. I get a new job. I'm making more money I've ever made in my life. I start doing the math. I'm getting ripped off. Right? So underneath this thing, this obsession, is this spiritual maladjustment. There is something underneath it that drives me. And it drives me to the obsession. The obsession drives me to the allergy. And the allergy kills me. So what it really means for me to be a drunk, the type that the big book's talking about, is very different. And you hear it in chapter 5. We read chapter 5, and that part where we read, it says, our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas, right? A, that I'm an alcoholic and I cannot manage my own life. B, that probably no human power, right? Not money, not property, not prestige can solve that problem. I can't solve a spiritual problem with a physical solution. And that third piece that God could and would have sought. And I'm thinking, before and after what? What the heck are they talking about? And what it is for me is before and after I stop drinking. See, the problem drinker comes into AA and thinks the unmanageability is because of drinking. If it's true, then stop drinking. But what I didn't understand, it's because of the unmanageability, this need to play God, this need to be right, this need to judge and label, that makes my life so unbearable that my own mother looks at me and says, for God's sake, son, drink. You were nicer. And unless I can develop that sense of comfort and ease that I always sought from alcohol through this process, an alcoholic of my type will never stay here. So what it really means for someone like me to be an alcoholic is when I stop drinking, the outsides get better, but the insides get worse. And the longest bridge I'll ever cross, the longest journey I will ever walk in recovery is that little dash between the first and second half of step 1. It's telling me I got a body that can't process alcohol, but more importantly, I have a mind that can't process reality. Not to my liking. So I got a body that can't drink and a mind that has to? You don't think that's a dilemma? And that's what the Al-Anons can't figure out about us. They can't figure out why we drink. We can't figure out why you don't. And now you know, and it's so funny because, alcohol is classified by the AMA as a depressant. 9 out of 10 people, they have a couple drinks and they say stuff like, I got to slow down. I'm feeling it. I got work tomorrow. I have a couple drinks and, honey, I want to get married. Right? I want to go to Vegas tonight. I'm trying to find the car keys I hid for myself before the first drink. Sound familiar? See, for me, alcohol's a stimulant. And that's what makes me bodily and mentally different from my fellows. It's not how much I drink or how often I drink, but that effect produced in me is so elusive that I cannot differentiate the true from the false. I will defend my right to drink because it does so much for me. I don't care what it's doing to me. And unless I fully comprehend the impact of that statement, I will never really understand what it means to be an alcoholic. Because if alcohol is the problem, the solution is abstinence. And all AA is the Sober Elks Club. A place to talk about our day. But if it is what the book says it is, this spiritual maladjustment, this distortion in my perception of reality, this thing which is a delusion that if people would change, only then I could be happy, which is the earmark even in Al-Anon, if that's what it is, then the solution has to be spiritual. And just like that triangle on the front of this podium right here, one of the things I was told is that, and there's a therapy out there called cognitive behavioral therapy, right? It's expensive. In AA, it costs $1. And the fundamental idea of that is I can't think my way into right living, but I can live my way into right thinking. And what I was told is very, very simple. This triangle, recovery, unity, and service, for someone like me, translates into 3 fundamental ideas. Contribute, belong, and learn. They're verbs. And the more I contribute, see, my spirit is blind, but the more I contribute, the more I feel needed. The more I belong, the more I feel wanted. The more I uncover, discover, and discard that which is blocking me from God, from self, and from others. For the first time in my life, I can give and receive love. Very, very simple idea. It's like if there was a weight pile in the middle of this room, and I lift weights every day. You think I'll get strong? Absolutely. Does it matter how I feel about it? Not at all. And what I was asked to do, if you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous, is take actions in AA that I did not yet believe in. Very, very powerful. In the therapeutic community, there's this thing called chop wood, carry water. And I used to think, what does that mean? Because I live in California, I would never know what that means. But what it means is if you live in the Arctic or up in northern Canada, if you don't chop wood every night, you freeze to death. You'll die. 40 below zero, you won't make it through one night. If you do, you'll never do it again. But if you chop wood and you put it in that stove every night, you can live. You can have a nice life. If you don't bring water up from that river, you die. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, what that translates into for someone like me is go to meetings, work steps, help others. Go to meetings, work steps, help others. Go to meetings, get a job, work steps, help others. Go to meetings, work steps, get married, help others. Go to meetings, work steps, bury a parent, help others. Go to meetings, work steps, lose a business, help others. Go to meetings, work steps. And what I discovered, if you're new, is that for someone like me, part of the word spiritual is ritual. And what I'm asked to do here is go to meetings, work steps, and help others. And what that seems to do over a period of time is it changes my perception of reality. And what happens is I discover that the steps over a period of time bring me wisdom. The fellowship where 2 or more are gathered bring me power. And by reaching back in my community for the first time in my life, I'm able to give and receive love. One of the most powerful things that happened to me, I've talked about it a few times. I was at LAX a while back, and I fly around a lot. And I'm actually dressed up like this at the airport. And this guy comes running up to me. He's wearing a slingshot t-shirt, full body tattoo. This is the way he's dressed at the airport. He runs up to me and he says, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I step back and I say, "No, I don't remember you." And I'm thinking he's going to hit me up for money, right? This guy looks at me. He's got these 2 little kids next to him. He's got a lady that's by his side. And this is what he said to me. He said, 15 years ago, you spoke on a prison panel. And something you said changed my life. These are my beautiful daughters. This is my amazing wife. We want to thank you. Now, 5 people, including myself, were all crying in the airport. The kids are hanging. The parents are crying, so the kids are crying. I'm crying because they're crying. We're all crying. It's a scene at LAX. I call my sponsor. My sponsor's like, Adam, you got a big mouth and a good memory. Don't let it go to your head. Click. But if you're new, I will tell you this. There are 2 dates in a human being's life. The day they're born and the day they find out why. And all my life, because I grew up in a pretty successful area, I always thought it was about the stuff. I thought the why was getting the trophies, getting the big job, get a pat on the back from my dad and mom. I thought it was all that. But it wasn't. Not for me. The why for me was that moment. That was the beginning of a change in me that I never ever understood. That was one of God's kids. That guy wasn't a convict that day. He was a great dad and he was a good husband. You know, I could tell by the way his kids and his wife looked at him. I could see it in their eyes. They respected and loved that guy. Just the way he was. And you know what? For me, that was a big deal. That was, if I could brag about anything, it was about those little moments. Those little moments. When some guy comes running up to you and says, you know, I heard you talking, you know, while I was fighting in a tank in Iraq. Or a guy was, you know, shooting meth in his neck in a camper out in the middle of this Mojave Desert. And something you said made me want to come back to AA. And I'm like, wow. And like I said, I'm just another guy with a big mouth and a good memory. But those little things, like this weekend with Patrick and Brad, who I said I was going to say his name 3 times, who I love, took me out to dinner, and we got to go to this ranch and hang out all weekend. And you guys broke my heart wide open. You have no idea. I am a loner to the death. And AA has forced me to be part of community. It's forced me because my sponsor said to me, if you do not help others, you're going to die. And one of my friends in LA said, you know, it's just like pro football, right? With football season. And he says, in football, you have 2 kinds of people. You got fans and you got players, right? And the players in AA are the ones that set up all these seats tonight. They're the ones that set up this podium, and they're the ones that made the coffee, and they're the ones that brought the literature. And then you got the fans. The fans are the ones that take the coffee and take the literature, right? And sit in the seats. And he said, AA is the most dangerous spectator sport in the world. There's 2 kinds of people here. Givers and takers. 90% of the world, takers. 10% givers. Now you think it's any different here? Wait till they ask for cleanup. But what we found out is it's the givers that are having all the fun. In the long haul, in the big picture, like my friend Patrick was saying today, 95% of the things in AA that need to be done are done by 5%. And it's about that ratio of the people that get to stay here. But it doesn't have to be that way. You know, we were talking about guests and hosts. Someone who's very famous in LA that I go to meetings with, he said there's 2 kinds of people. Another way to look at people, he said there's guests and there's hosts. And the guest is never happy. There's no onions on my burger. I asked for a king-size bed. I asked for a non-smoking room. I can't believe the way this is decorated, right? The guest is never happy, no matter... Some of us live with people like that. Never happy. Something's always wrong. The fault-finding mind is what drives the guest. But the host is being helpful. And that was very much what happened to Bill Wilson. He was grandiose, he was sensitive, he was immature, he had this God thing. And Bill Wilson became a host. To have the heart of a servant was what it was required for me to stay here. I can have the mind of a king, and that's a grandiose statement. But to have a heart of a servant, to become a giver. I mean, I'll close with this. If someone did to me what I did to myself, I hate to say it, but I would have killed them. If someone did to me what I did to others, I would have killed them. And then I come to AA, and you want me to pray to God? I didn't want God to find out where I was. I'd become bankrupt in those 3 simple relationships. If you look at the 12 steps by design, they really remedy those 3 relationships. Steps 1 through 3, recreate and develop a relationship with God. 4 through 7, recreate and develop a relationship with self. 8 and 9, recreate and develop a relationship with others. It's a very simple idea. 10 maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with self. 11 maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with God. 12 through service maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with others. So coming out of the steps, a selfish, self-centered drunk like me is not only easily able to control my desire for alcohol, that's a statement right out of the doctor's opinion, but for the first time in my life, I'm able to live in harmony with God, with self, and with others. There was a great spiritual teacher. He was asked, what's the most important thing of all your teachings? He said, love God with all thy heart, love thy neighbor as thyself. And if God scares you out of AA and you're a real drunk, don't worry about it. Booze will scare you back in. So in 1 through 3, I give it up. 4 through 7, I clean it up. 8 and 9, I make it up. 10, 11, and 12, I keep it up. Very simple idea. Einstein had said, I would rather live my life pretending there's a God and finding out there isn't than live my life pretending there's no God and finding out there is. So one of the things that happened to me, which was pivotal, was when I got out of that 28th residential treatment center, the guy that was running the detox said to me, why don't you come back to our hospital next week and tell all the patients how you managed to stay sober a whole week if you can make it. And then he basically removed me from the property. And I was so offended by that for the next 8 years I sat in 2 hours of bumper-to-bumper traffic from one side of my county to the other to tell a bunch of strangers in a detox that didn't care how I stayed sober another week and I was tricked into service. All those years, I never understood the fundamental idea of Bill Wilson when he came out of Towns Hospital for the 3rd time. He had lost everything in life worthwhile. He said he was overcome with waves of depression. And Bill Wilson, this one guy, got a very simple idea. Maybe if I go back in that hospital and talk to some of the patients, I'll feel better. That's all it was. And what's so interesting about that is he calls Dr. Silkworth. We all know Silkworth was a double board certified physician, psychiatry and neurology. And Silkworth's like, you want to do what, Bill? He'd never heard of such an idea. But he allowed Bill Wilson to come back in Towns Hospital. And what Silkworth saw from 1935 to 1939, he said was absolutely amazing. He was so amazed by the results that he saw in Bill that first endorsement in the doctor's opinion where it says you can absolutely rely on anything these men say about themselves was a letter of credibility given to Bill Wilson by a double board certified physician that he had this letter that he could hopefully at least use to get into other hospitals and talk to drunks. And what's so powerful about that is I hear a lot of people say, I do a step a year and all this stuff, but if you really look at what Bill Wilson did, in 1935, he had a couple weeks out of that hospital, and he was going back in there talking to people. That little idea, all 3 pieces in Bill's story, page 14, you see he went through the steps with Evie. Surrender, catharsis, restitution, and service. And on the next page it said Lois and I, him and his wife, abandoned themselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other drunks. And at the very bottom of that page it says we attended meetings frequently so newcomers would have a place to find fellowship. Not so they could feel better for the night or get their card signed, so they could be there for the next guy, to pay it forward. There's a poem in Notre Dame that says, I sought my God I could not see. I sought my soul I could not free. I sought my brother, and I found all 3. And it's such a powerful thing. That last piece in the 7th chapter where it says nothing ensures immunity from drinking more than intensive work with others. If you're new, you've hit the lotto. Find a sponsor, ask for directions, do what he says. If not, get my number and call me. Thank you very much.
My name is Ron. I'm an alcoholic, and whatever he said, right? Let's our speakers come here at their own time and expense. Thank everybody, that Brad and everybody and Pat for even driving around today. And it's customary for us to form a line. Thank our speakers personally. It means a lot to them. You know, they take all the time out of them just to come and carry a message, like somebody did to them. So, what else? Our sister group is a big book study, 7:30 p.m. Salem every Thursday. Come over and see us if you're struggling. If you're not struggling, come over and help the newcomer. Anyway, we got a nice way of closing, and don't forget the meeting after the meeting. Take a moment of silence, use it however you like, and if you care to join us for one with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation,